This is not a drill. And I am not exaggerating when I tell you that what just happened between General Motors and the Canadian government is one of the most explosive corporate showdowns we have witnessed in decades. If you are an American worker, an investor, or just someone who cares about the direction of the economy, you need to pay attention. Every single word matters because this story is moving fast, it is getting ugly, and the consequences are going to ripple across North America for years to come. General Motors, one of the most iconic American companies ever built, a company that helped win World War II and put America on wheels, has just gutted its operations in Canada. I mean gutted them. They cut an entire production shift at the Ottawa assembly plant in Ontario, throwing roughly 500 employees out the door. But when you factor in the supply chain workers, parts suppliers, and small businesses that rely on that plant, the number grows to over 1,200 people who woke up one morning with secure, well-paying manufacturing jobs and went to bed that night with nothing. And that is not even the worst part. Just months earlier, GM shut down its entire bright drop electric van operation at the Cami assembly plant in Ingersoll, Ontario, wiping out another 1,000 jobs. 2 massive plant cuts in under 6 months, over 2,000 Canadian manufacturing jobs gone, and the reason GM gives is that they need to realign production to adjust to the evolving trade environment. Translation? Tariffs. The 25% import duties slapped on vehicles crossing the border. And here is where it gets wild. The Canadian government did not sit quietly. They didn't issue a statement and move on. Melanie Joly, Canada's industry minister, went on national television and said point blank that the government would claw back every single dollar of public funding given to GM. She made it clear taxpayer money was provided to create jobs in Canada, and GM took that money and moved those jobs to Indiana. Weeks before, Ottawa had already served a default notice to Stellantis over its idled plant in Brampton. The message is crystal clear. If you take Canadian money and abandon Canadian workers, the government will come after you. This marks a seismic shift in how governments deal with multinational corporations. Now, let me break down what GM actually did. While they cut the shift in Oshawa, they simultaneously hired 250 temporary workers at their Fort Wayne, Indiana plant. Both plants build the same truck, the Chevrolet Silverado. GM moved 50,000 units of truck production out of Canada and directly to the U.S. On paper, this might look like a win for American workers. But here's the reality. The new hires in Fort Wayne are temporary. They don't receive the same pay, benefits, or job security as the 1,200 people in Oshawa who lost everything. Who wins? GM. They are using tariffs as cover to restructure labor costs, to shift production wherever they can pay the least. And the people getting squeezed? The workers on both sides of the border. Then there's Warren Buffett. When he talks, the financial world listens. Buffett once held a significant stake in GM, buying 10 million shares back in 2017 at about $34 a share. But he started selling in 2022, dumped more in 2023, and eventually exited entirely. Why? The auto industry, as he has long said, is too tough. Margins are razor-thin, capital requirements enormous, labor costs crushing, and regulatory hurdles countless. Add tariffs on top of that, and you have a perfect storm. Plant closures, mass layoffs, and corporations pitting countries against each other to maximize profit. Buffett has called tariffs an act of war to some degree, warning that using trade as a weapon is not just unwise, it's dangerous. The Oracle of Omaha is sitting on $347 billion in cash, seeing risks that most of us are just starting to notice. And this GM Canada situation is not an isolated incident. The North American auto industry is in crisis. Vehicles from Canada and Mexico now face 25% tariffs, throwing supply chains into chaos. Cars and parts once flowed freely across borders under trade agreements that created millions of jobs. Those agreements are being torn up, and automakers are scrambling to figure out where to build, what to build, and how to survive. GM alone took a $7.2 billion write-down on its electric vehicle business last year, mostly from cancelled contracts and weak sales. The Bright Drop van plant in Ingersoll was designed to produce 50,000 units a year, but sold fewer than 2,000 inches 2024. GM's story is not just weak demand, it's tariffs making the operation economically impossible. Workers, unions, and the Canadian government know this. Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union, has accused GM of prioritizing appeasement of the U.S. administration over protecting Canadian workers. Local union leaders at CAMI and Oshawa are prepared to take extreme measures, even occupying facilities if equipment is removed. Families are devastated. Over 1,000 jobs gone, livelihoods destroyed, communities shaken to their core. Meanwhile, Toyota is expanding in Canada, highlighting a stark contrast. Minister Joly has hinted at inviting Chinese automakers to set up operations. The geopolitical implications of China building cars in Canada while American companies pull out are enormous. This is a fundamental realignment of the North American auto industry. For American consumers, this matters too. Tariffs don't disappear, they get passed on. Industry executives warn car prices will rise. Toyota has already absorbed $8 billion in tariff costs in 9 months, calling them disruptive and unsustainable. GM and Ford are bleeding billions and expect to continue losing in 2026. Even Supreme Court rulings have done little to alleviate auto-specific tariffs imposed on national security grounds. The economic pressure is real, and the impact is coming straight to your wallet. On the ground, cities like Oshawa, Ontario, built by the auto industry, are facing devastation. Generations worked at GM plants. Fathers, sons, granddaughters, all reliant on steady work. Over 1,000 jobs gone. Local businesses, restaurants, daycare centres and hardware stores all feel the ripple effect. Ingersoll, Street, Catharines, Brampton, all across Ontario the industry is hollowed out. The human cost is staggering. Flint, Michigan, serves as a grim warning. Once the lifeblood of GM, it is now a cautionary tale of how communities collapse when corporate decisions and unstable trade policies align. People in Oshawa and Ingersoll are watching Flint and fearing it may be their future. And beyond auto workers, the investment landscape is shifting. Warren Buffett dumping GM shares, warning about trade, sitting on billions of cash, is a signal flashing red. The smartest money in the world doesn't see enough certainty to invest. GM's forecasted earnings growth for 2026 is overshadowed by underlying issues. Tariffs, declining EV market share, strained relations with production partners, and a Canadian government demanding subsidy repayment. Stock prices may double, but that doesn't matter to investors concerned with sustainable business. We are witnessing the end of an era in North American manufacturing. The era of seamless cross-border supply chains, optimized for efficiency and prosperity, where workers on both sides benefited. That era is dying. In its place is economic nationalism, corporate leverage over governments, and workers caught in the crossfire. Real people, real jobs, real communities are suffering, and the auto industry as we knew it is being reshaped in real time. GM invested over $1 billion to retool CAMI for electric vehicles, promising jobs, retraining workers, and community growth. Then tariffs hit, EV demand softened, political winds shifted, and over 1,000 families in Ingersoll, plus another 1,000, 200 inches Oshawa, were left with nothing. The whole tragedy could have been avoided with stable, predictable trade policies that gave businesses the confidence to invest long-term. The American auto industry was once the pride of the nation, representing innovation, manufacturing excellence, and ambition. Henry Ford built the assembly line, GM built the middle class, Chrysler proved resilience was possible. But that foundation of stability, cross-border cooperation, and long-term planning is cracking. And right now, nobody has a clear answer for what comes next. Not automakers, not politicians, not union leaders, and not even the Oracle of Omaha. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Because what just happened with GM in Canada is not just a corporate story, it is a warning for every American, every Canadian, and frankly, anyone who depends on global trade. This is a lesson in how fragile modern manufacturing really is when politics, tariffs, and corporate greed collide. When GM shuttered plants in Oshawa and Ingersoll, it didn't just remove jobs, it sent shockwaves through supply chains that stretch across North America. Parts suppliers, logistics companies, local businesses, all of them now face uncertainty, layoffs, and potential bankruptcy. This is a domino effect, and once one piece falls, the rest follow. The human cost is immense, but the economic cost doesn't stop there. What we are witnessing is a transformation of the North American auto industry into a landscape dominated by short-term thinking. Temporary labor replaces stable jobs, tariff policy becomes a weapon, and multinational corporations hold entire communities hostage. And let's be clear, this is not just Canada's problem. As costs rise, as automakers pass tariffs to consumers, as investment slows, Americans will feel the pinch too. New car prices will rise, used car prices will rise, and the promise of affordable transportation will fade for millions of families. What GM did may look like business sense on a spreadsheet, but the ripple effects are profound and long-lasting. The union response in Canada highlights another critical point. When workers organize, they push back. Unifor's national president, Lana Payne, accused GM of caving to U.S. pressure and prioritizing political appeasement over human lives. And the local union leaders didn't just issue statements, they signaled readiness to physically occupy plants if equipment is removed. This is desperation in action, but it is also courage. Workers are standing up for their livelihoods in a moment where corporate and political decisions feel out of reach, yet their stakes could not be higher. Families that had planned around these jobs are now facing financial uncertainty, and communities that were built around manufacturing face a generational threat to stability. Meanwhile, governments are being forced to redefine their approach to multinational corporations. Canada's clawback policy marks a shift. Public money given to corporations is not a blank check. If companies abandon workers, governments will pursue repayment. This is a clear message to every global business. Decisions that disregard communities will not be tolerated. The political and economic landscape is changing, and the balance of power is shifting. Corporations like GM are learning that profit cannot be divorced from responsibility, and governments are learning that accountability can be enforced even in the face of multinational giants. And here's the crux. This is just the beginning. Tariffs remain high, trade policies remain unpredictable, and supply chains remain fragile. Companies are freezing investments, delaying product launches, and hiring temporary labor instead of full-time employees. Consumers will bear the costs, workers will bear the insecurity, and communities will bear the devastation. And yet, opportunities remain for those who can adapt. Companies like Toyota, moving into Ontario, signal that investment will flow where policies are stable, where governments are clear, and where communities are protected. Geopolitics, trade negotiations, and corporate strategy will shape the next decade of manufacturing, and the choices made today will determine who wins and who loses. As Americans and Canadians, we are watching history unfold, and it is not a quiet story. It is messy, it is complicated, and it is personal. This is a moment to think critically about the kind of economy we want, the kind of corporations we support, and the kind of policies we enforce. GM's actions are not isolated. They are a reflection of a system where profit often outweighs people and short-term gains often eclipse long-term stability. We have to pay attention because the lessons here are universal. When one industry is destabilized, when one government challenges corporate power, when one community suffers, it sends signals to the rest of the world. Finally, let's bring it back to the human story. In Ottawa and Ingersoll, families are reeling. Fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, neighbors, they built their lives around these plants. Their futures, once seemingly secure, are now uncertain. The ripple effects will be felt for years, and yet there is hope. There is hope because governments are pushing back, unions are organizing, and companies that see opportunity and stability are stepping in. The future of North American manufacturing will not look the same as it did, but that doesn't mean it cannot thrive. It means we have to rebuild, rethink, and demand more accountability. It means understanding that trade, investment, and corporate strategy are not abstract. They are personal, they are local, and they are transformative. So here's the takeaway. The GM Canada story is a wake-up call. It is a warning about tariffs, about unstable trade policies, about corporate decisions made in pursuit of profit over people. It is a story about the fragility of supply chains, the vulnerability of workers, and the power of governments to hold corporations accountable. And it is a story that matters to everyone, not just Canadians or Americans, because global trade touches every life in some way. Watch closely, because this is how the next chapter of manufacturing, politics, and corporate responsibility will be written, and it will affect us all. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Share this with someone who needs to see the stakes, who needs to understand the depth of what is happening. Hit that subscribe button if you want to stay ahead of breaking developments, because stories like this don't just unfold, they ripple outward. And the next move, whether by governments, corporations, or unions, will shape the future of millions. The GM Canada saga is a masterclass in economic power, human cost, and political responsibility. And as we watch it all play out, the question remains, will we learn the lessons before it is too late?